and we had some, everywhere in between up to some senior adults present that participated. So it was a good range. We handed out 54 $100 gift cards to those qualified residents who got their first-time vaccination. And also, if you were present and you want to get a booster, you didn't qualify for the gift card, but you were able to get your booster there as well. And we had 7 booster shots that were given during the vaccine drive. And as you see on the sheet that's not in the adopted agenda at this point, there was some talk previously about some additional opportunities geographically for programs. And so we anticipate that there may be some discussion amongst the committee and our council about future opportunities for other locations to have vaccine drives. And we do have remaining gift cards that we could put towards that effort if the committee and the council so choose to do that. So that's the report out related to the community outreach program specific to the vaccine drive. And certainly we'll take any questions or hear any discussion that members of the committee or council would like to engage in at this time.
So thank you, Mr. Brown, you and the team for really going out of your way. I think the event was very well organized and it was very well attended. It's our hopes that, I know I've spoken to Ms. Newton, that she has interest in expanding these opportunities. As we talked about previously at our other committee meetings, that we would pilot it at the Meeting Place Church, and then with the hopes if it was successful, and by all definition from MUSC, it was beyond successful. They stated to me that if they had gotten 15 people vaccinated that day, then they deemed the day successful. So we had, well over 60 people to be vaccinated. So we did a tremendous job, and I think a lot of that speaks to the links that the staff went to make sure that individuals came out. So with that, Ms. Newton is looking to host an event on November the 20th. Down in the Lower Richland area, I'm looking to host an event on December the 5th in the Northeast area. And so I would, I know that our committee is limited today, but our hopes was that we would be able to take a motion to council to further expand these opportunities throughout our county, and utilizing the remaining 250 gift cards that we have. And even if this body is even willing to set forth an amount that we can say that we will use for incentives, I think that would be definitely one of the things that I would like to see for us to move forward to full council for approval of a certain amount of incentives. Because Mr. Brown, we allocated give you the exact amount of money that we allocated.
So with the 250 persons that we could, so at $100, it was $25,000. So we have $19,600 remaining in gift cards that can be utilized to further these programs geographically throughout the county for Richland County residents.
Would it be your recommendation that we continue to expend these funds, or to add on some additional dollars to move forward with these pilot sites throughout the county, or any other incentives that we look to put in place?
Sure. So it's a good question, and I'll answer it directly, and then we did have multiple staff that were there, and they kind of took some notes about how many people could come through in an hour to get an idea of roughly, what you could do. So it probably really depends on two things. One, how long is your drive going to be, and whether or not individuals are pre-registered for that drive or they walk-ups. If individuals are walk-ups where you're loading them into the system at that time, then you're probably, I think we estimated, what was about 30? Okay, so they had 2 people, I think at MUSC out there registering persons. So you could register roughly about 15 persons per hour. So there are 2, it was about 30. And that's if they're walking up and not already registered in the system. So that kind of gives you an idea of roughly how many cards if everybody comes in for first-time shots, you could take that number and then extrapolate. So the idea, I think, in terms of a recommendation would be to utilize the remaining $19,600 in gift cards, first, and, as necessary, you may add an additional amount. Then you may say, up to this amount. So that way, if you go through your first pilot program or your next program and you see you only have, 30 gift cards left, and we need to acquire more for the next program, potentially in December, then we could have that flexibility without having to come back and do 2 or 3 other meetings. So I would recommend some type of motion that would allow you to use what you have, and then some amount that would be accessible if you were able to spend those funds and you needed more gift cards.
And so I would just like to hear from Mr. Pugh. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Mackey, thank you for joining us. To a little bit further discussion about how we could proceed with these pilot programs. Mr. Livingston?
Yes, I would agree that would be. We have actually approved the 25 the money for the 250 individuals. 250 individuals. So I would strongly suggest that we work within that, so that way you won't have to worry about getting an approval for the amount. So let that be the rest of our pilot money, and then if we get beyond that, then we just ask council to appropriate some more funding. I think it'd be helpful in that respect. The November 5th and December November 20th and December 5th projected dates, are those centered around any particular event or something, or are they more standalone?
The November the 20th event, based on what I heard from Ms. Newton, it is solely a standalone event. The 5th is a community event that has been coupled with a holiday celebration. And so, we'll have activities for children there. That will be, we will be giving the vaccination for children at that particular event, which is going to be probably one of the first ones, as MUSC will unroll their vaccination for children on the 29th. So we do anticipate that will probably be a larger one, given that it's right at Christmas time, and if we're doing the incentives, my son just got his vaccination, but had I known, we probably would have held up a little bit, for that. So I would imagine that people will come out. So you've got two different types of events.
One is coming upon us too. We have to figure out a way to get that on the council agenda.
Well, we would be able to put that forth. We do have a report out today. However, of course, we won't be able to take any action on this item from given a formal recommendation to council, but we do have another meeting on next week. So perhaps we may have to look at having another ad hoc committee meeting to be able to get the recommendation for it so that the 20th event can move forward.
That's just going to give us time for planning for it.
But what planning are you concerned about? Because I think that...
And the message out and stuff like that is saying, we can still do the event, but I'm saying we can't make the commitment that we're going to provide the funding without council approval.
Correct. So if we're able to get council approval on next week, would that not provide us enough time?
It's similar to the conversation that we actually had related to the event that we just participated in. Ideally, you would want more time to be able to publicize and get the word out to as many people as possible. It doesn't preclude you from getting it done. We just have a smaller window. But if the county was willing to do that, then we just understand we had a smaller window, and we could take into account the volume of participation that we had. And if we had a great number, then we could see how many people were interested. And if it were a smaller number, it doesn't prevent us from, if Ms. Newton or another council member said, we want to do it and have more time to vocalize it, I mean, we could address that at a a separate meeting that the county might have.
Further?
Oh, not for now.
And I think that as we process through this, I guess my question would be, and maybe Ms. Only, you can help us with this, is the specific motion that went before council, did it speak specifically to the Meeting Place Church, or was it specific to the pilot program? Because if it's specific to the pilot program, then I would think that this would fall in that category, that these additional dates would fall in the category, because we're still talking about the same 250 vaccination or incentives.
I believe that it was for the pilot program, but I'll check the minutes and let you know for sure.
Because I think that's going to be, could be the way that we can move forward with this. Mr. Brown, do you recall if the motion was specific to
Yes, ma'am. This question,
the Meeting Place?
And this question came up, and it was a good question, and I'll tell you what I recall, and I certainly would rely on the clerk to check the minutes. But what I recall was there was a discussion that led off with, at that time, Vice Chair McBride discussing about the Meeting Place, and then she talked about an additional follow-up date. And at that time, the discussion was we were only approving the initial program, and that any subsequent dates for a program would have to come back. So that is my recollection of that. So it was specific to the Meeting Place initial event. So I'm saying the Meeting Place, but that initial event and any future events would have to come back, which brought the question that Ms. Newton raised about geography and not being limited to one part of the county. So again, I certainly will rely on the clerk to check the minutes, but that is my recollection, my understanding that the program would have to be expanded to include future places. And so from this meeting, well, I guess maybe not this meeting now, but maybe what it would be wise to do is, like you're discussing now, since we see the success, let's utilize, we've already had the funding, let's say we can do multiple sites until the funding runs out, and then anything else would have to come back before the body to address.
So, Ms. Only, if you find it, just let me know, because I think that's going to be critical as to how we move forward and being able to have this date that's already in place for November the 20th. So with that, we'll keep moving, Mr. Brown, and let's take up item number 5, the mental health check-in program.
Yes, ma'am. This item came to us by way of a discussion with the Richland County Sheriff's Department, and I'll talk to you briefly, and then I'll certainly yield space if appropriate to the Sheriff's Department. But I'll turn your attention to page 9 of the briefing document for those of you who have it available. If not, I'll just read a section that I think represents the bulk of the discussion. It talks about, I'm down at paragraph number 3 on page number 9 of the briefing document of the agenda packet. It says, therefore, we must take proactive measures to protect our deputies' mental health. One of the benefits of our sheriff being the National Sheriff of the Year and on the board of the Major County Sheriff's Association is that he has an inside view of proposed legislation at the federal level related to police reform. He believes federal legislation is forthcoming, and in an effort to be on the forefront of health and wellness for our deputies, he would like to proactively implement this new annual program. And then it goes on to talk about the specifics of the program in terms of the annual cost and the pricing. The cost of this program is $16,250 annually, with $4,062.50 due by December 15th of 2021, which anticipates a January 1, 22 start. Staff recommends allocating $81,250 in American Rescue Plan funds to fund this program through December 31st, 2026. Following this initial period, the general fund would allocate $16,250 annually to continue this program if it is deemed successful. So the ask is that the funding be utilized from the American Rescue Plan dollars to address this program and specific to this mental health check-in. So with that being said, Chair Barron, I will certainly yield the floor as necessary to the Sheriff's Department, but that's why this item is before this committee, is because this type of program is appropriate for American Rescue Plan dollars, and so we brought it to the ad hoc committee for consideration at the county level.
So my first question would be, we are looking to implement this program to preempt what we believe is going to take place in future legislation.
According to the information that was shared with us by the Sheriff's Department, yes, ma'am. And that's kind of why I led off with that, because certainly we look to the individuals who are bringing us information to speak to why it is there's a need and what the need is. And so that is our understanding from the Sheriff's Department, and we took that information and provided it here to the county committee.
I definitely would. I'd like to hear from the Sheriff's Department just to be able to provide us some additional information as the importance of this program.
Okay.
I'll start over. I'm Deputy Chief Harry Polis. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of the mental health check-in program that the Sheriff is interested in implementing for the department. July 28, 2017, our department experienced a tragedy when Deputy Derek Fish died by suicide in the back parking lot of our Region 3 substation. It was a tragedy for this agency. And the sheriff said one of the things that we made a mistake on back then was that we don't talk about officer suicide enough. To date, 120 officers in this country have taken their own life. Statistically, a law enforcement officer is more likely to die by suicide than they are to be killed in line of duty. So the sheriff has been part of many conversations with his federal partners about legislation that is coming down in as a result of police reform. For the last 2 or 3 years, we've heard a lot about police reform, and we strongly believe, the sheriff strongly believes, that one of the programs that are going to be mandated as part of the federal police reform package is a mental health check-in program for law enforcement officers. For a long time, we have really focused our efforts on physical health. We prepare for gunfights, we prepare for street fights, we prepare for all these things. What we have not prepared adequately for in the past is the mental wellness of the officers that are doing the job. We put a very strong focus on physical health. We need to put a stronger focus on mental health, overall mental wellness. So we would ask that this council consider funding this program for the first 5 years, and the sheriff really wants to take this ball and run with it and be on the forefront of mental health, mental wellness for our deputies.
Thank you, Chief. I will open up for any questions or comments about this particular item.
Well, sounds like a good program to me and pretty cost effective in terms of the annual cost after 2026. So it's certainly something I can support.
I would agree, and I think that we've seen tremendous how you all were on the front lines along with many others during the last 19 months. So definitely it's something that I think that we could support. Of course, we will need the full committee to be able to take a recommendation to council, and we will work to get that in a meeting, hopefully in the next week, to be able to do so. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you will, Councilman Pugh.
Chief Polis, I would like to thank the sheriff and the leadership for having those tough conversations, because a lot of times we don't want to have these conversations, but it's better to have these conversations up front than to have what happened to that sheriff hit home for us to know there's a problem. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Good time that Richland County is in the front of something, and I think it's wonderful. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And Mr. Brown, we'll move to item number 6, COVID-19 Pandemic Small Business Relief Grant Program.
Thank you. I want to turn your attention to 2 pages in your packet, so I'm going to turn it to page number 13. Page 13, I'm going to look at the bottom part of that page, and it talks about what action the county has already taken. So this is an example where the county has actually taken previous action to approve a holistic plan, and now we're coming back and talking about a specific target, and in order to effectively move those dollars. So ideally, in the future, what we will do is we will talk about approving the whole plan and the subcomponents, so that instead of potentially, slowing down the movement of a program, we will have already taken those steps. But in this instance, at the time, we just approved the holistic plan. So at the bottom of page 13, you see it says the county's fiscal year 2021 Community Development Block Grant coronavirus budget totals $2,197,908, of which $300,000 was allocated to economic development grants to small businesses to provide pandemic relief in response to COVID-19. Council approved the CDBG-CV, which stands for, again, Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Dollars, action plan as a consent agenda, item F, 15F, on July 13, 2021. Now, if you turn your attention to page number 19, what you have there is, you have the breakdown of really what we're asking for in terms of this particular program. So page 19, 36 of the agenda packet, you see there it says COVID-19 Pandemic Small Business Relief Grant Summary. So looking at that, the overview talks about these are expected to be one-time grants of up to $15,000 to reimburse small businesses for COVID-related expenses. And this might sound familiar to you. This is something that the county did utilizing disaster recovery funds that it had on the side that the county council approved for the administrator. This is before the county received funding from CDBG for coronavirus dollars. So this is not the same program. This is a different program using a different pot of money. So the purpose is to help provide economic relief to small businesses that incurred unanticipated expenses due to COVID-19, to help mitigate risk of business closure or employee layoffs resulting from pandemic's economic impact. We talk about the target audience, and I won't necessarily read all of these right now, but for those of you who have this packet, you can see the details. For those who are listening in who don't have the packet, the target audience is for enterprises with 1 to 50 employees at the time of the application. And the idea is that depending on the number of applicants we get, you can have someone get up to $15,000, but we have a total of $300,000 that could be utilized for any applicants that apply to the program. So the request is for the committee to approve this program, and then you may say, well, Mr. Brown, what happens if we don't approve this program? If you don't approve this program, what it means is then we have to figure out another program to utilize these funds for this type of initiative, because that's what we submitted to HUD related to these funds. So that's why it's this program that we're recommending, because the plan that was approved by council to HUD talked about how we would spend those dollars.
Mr. Brown, Mr. Livingston, you're right.
Mr. Brown, what kind of deadline we have on getting this approved?
Yes, sir. So the deadline is, I have that in here. Let me get that for you. And I might have somebody can tell me real quick. There is, and I do have that answer. Let me see if it's in the packet, Mr. Livingston. We have from the time that we approved these monies late. So it was roughly about like a 3-year, if I'm not mistaken. I hear somebody say yes? Okay. And when we approved it, I think we were already going into the 2nd year. So, Mr. Livingston, we're almost, let's just say we're 2 years into the 3-year time window. So that would be another constraint that we would have to address, sir. And that late approval was a function of, if you remember at the time, and I know it's tough because it's tough for me too, CARES Act funding, we had a lot of things going on with different money that was coming in different pots. And originally, one of the questions that were being asked is, we kept talking about what part of money are we talking about? So you had CARES Act funding, there was the CLR funding on one side, and then you had CDBG come in and say, you can use this money allocated from CDBG funding to address coronavirus as well. So that's why we had a number of different programs and dollars that we were talking about. Long answer to your question, but I believe we had a 3-year window, and we're in year 2 of that 3-year window.
Indeed, time sensitive.
Yes, ma'am.
Along with everything else we talked about today that we can't get taken care of. Ms. Mackey?
Thank you. Now, I was just going to point to page 14 under regulatory compliance, and it states that we are already in program year 2. So it is definitely important that we spend, and according to this, is 80% needs to be spent.
So with that, Mr. Brown, because that was going to be my next question. Thank you, Ms. Mackey. And that was of the 80%, if council does approve the proposal that is submitted by staff, will that put us at our 80%?
We have to come back to you with, and that's not in here. I think it is in general, but there are 2 of the funds. If you look on page, let me find it for you, because there's the breakdown, and you'll see the number. It's $957,000. That breakdown was the total amount of funding that we needed to take care of. So part of that money was this program, the other part, which is businesses, the other part, I think, was $500,000 for nonprofits. So we have to come back to you as well and do something similar with that pot of funding as well. So
go ahead.
So those are the 2 pots that we have to address. So one is nonprofit, but this right now is for profit. So once we do that, then we'll be on track. And we'll probably do something similar to the program that we did, the disaster recovery funding that the county previously used, but for nonprofits. So once we get the $300,000 and then part of that $500,000, then we'll be able to address what you're asking in terms of getting the rest of those dollars used.
So are we not in a position to, especially now that we are slightly delaying this vote and to go before full council, are we not in a position to be able to present the business and the nonprofit portion together so that we can expedite the matters to be able to continue to keep this ship rolling?
I think we'll be able to do that. And I think initially what kind of goes to our conversation earlier about the pilot program and the other dollars. So sometimes out of our caution for how we are, given too much breath, we produce or we approve smaller portions. And so in this instance, staff was actually asking me, Mr. Brown, do we even have to take this to council because they approved the plan, right? And so my purview was, let's be clear to what we're doing, because if someone comes back out and asks questions about how is this money going out, where is this coming from, and when do we discuss this, it would be better if it was clear that this is what we were doing. So in short, the answer to your question is yes, and the reason for this coming to you now is because we've just asked for that additional level of clarity and communication so that staff has the support that it needs when it rolls out these grants, and council members are not worried about, who's being included and why we weren't aware of this money, even though the general plan was approved back in, July. A lot of stuff has happened since then, and we don't want people to feel like there's not equity in how we're distributing these dollars, and there's not clarity in how we are distributing these dollars.
Understood. And I think that because we are behind, I would like to see us be able to put both programs forth at the same time. That way staff can, once council has approved it, then staff can move forward with doing what they need to do as expeditiously as possible to be able to get the funds back into the community. So since we do have a little bit of time before it goes before council, I'd like to see that the nonprofit portion to be wrapped in there, and then you guys can go forth.
Okay. That would conclude my overview on that item.
Anything further for item number 6? Okay, if not, that was our last order of business for today. So, yes, I guess so. So, Ms. Only, if you'll call the roll for adjournment.
Livingston, Barron.
Thank you all so much.